Hi, welcome to SBR Videos. I'm Peter Loshak. Today is August 7th, and we are continuing our regular series of calls with Doug Upstone, previewing and forecasting various divisions in baseball. Right now, we're going to start with the NL East. We're covering the National League this week. Doug, thanks for being back with us.
Peter, I'm glad to be back once again, and boy, we have some haves and some have-nots in this division.
Yeah, things are kind of turning around a little bit here after the All-Star break, after the trade deadline. And first, let's get to your forecast from last time. Pretty interesting because it's all about the lines, right? You said bet on Washington, and you said play against Philly. And both those teams went 8-8 since our last video. But Washington was very overvalued, so they had an ROI of minus 17% with that 8-8 record. And Philly was actually a good bet despite going just 8-8. They were plus 6% ROI since our last video. So, that tells you right there that we're forecasting here odds that we don't know what those odds are going to be. You also suggested to bet unders on Atlanta, and they actually went 7-6 over under since our last call, but they are still 56.5% unders on the year. So those are our forecasts from last time. The biggest trender on the year right now in the National League East, though, is Miami. They're still 59% overs on the year. That's best in baseball. But since our last video, they are plus 40% ROI, second best in baseball. And so they have been a very good bet in recent weeks. And Atlanta has been absolutely tanking, minus 50% ROI since our last video. So those are two very strong unders for the past 2 or 3 weeks. Do you think either of those continue, both, or neither?
In terms of the general trend, I mean, there's no way Atlanta is going to be as bad as they've been, recently. I mean, they'll turn it around, but this is still not a very good team. I mean, they're basically 500. All their peripheral numbers point to a 500 team. And frankly, when you look at their offense, which is just abysmal, it's 3.7 runs per game. You see them, and they're just not performing. You take away Freddie Freeman and Justin Upton, and basically you got the San Diego Padres, with this team. So I don't see where there's anything to like about the Braves. Unders seem to be, a better way to go because they just don't score enough runs. Right. Their pitching is certainly more than adequate.
Yeah, I'll tell you, out of those two trends, I could see Miami struggling a little bit. I'm not exactly sure I'd want to be betting on them going forward, but I do think, because these past few weeks I've been betting against Atlanta pretty consistently, not necessarily because I think they're going to lose, but I look down, I see their lineup, like you said, and then I see their lines like minus 160, 170, 180, and, maybe it's because, Tehran is pitching or someone like that, but I just see Atlanta as pretty overvalued right now. That would probably be my personal best pick in the NL East to continue fading Atlanta. Now let's talk about Washington. Washington, for a while, a lot of people were thinking that they were going to be a strong team down the stretch, but they've just been mediocre and clearly by their ROI, very overvalued. They're kind of similar to Atlanta. I've been seeing, what they are on paper and then looking at their lines. Their lines very inflated. What's your forecast for Washington going forward?
That's really a tough call, Peter, with them, because you look at this team and you certainly, you can make an argument that at any given time they could go 8-2, 9-1 and just get red hot. But they just haven't. And this has been the case with them all year. So I think it's a very difficult team to bet. It's a very difficult team to forecast. Anything can possibly happen with them, good or bad. And so I really don't have a strong feeling on them. The other thing that they have run into a little bit of bad luck because they're 13-17 in run games and 3-8 in extra innings. So that's, that hasn't helped them. And obviously there's just luck involved there. But overall, I just don't really like this team much going forward, even though I picked them probably a month ago to win the National League. I'm probably going to be backing off that at this point.
I agree with you. My sense on Washington is, in general, I see them as a pretty overvalued team, except when Doug Fister's pitching. I'm in love with Doug Fister. I don't just love him. I'm actually actively in love with him. I take him whenever he's even if he's minus 150, minus 160 going against another good pitcher. So I like betting on Washington when Fister's starting, but with anyone else starting, I do think they're kind of overvalued. All right, so let's get to our forecast for the NL East. I don't know what you're going to pick here, but my recommendations before we hear what you have to say is I would look at betting against Atlanta, continuing that one. And Washington, I don't know. I would look to bet against them, except when Fister's starting, and then bet on them. What are your official forecasts for the NL East for the upcoming weeks?
Okay, the official forecast for the upcoming week is I would continue to look to play against Philadelphia when they're at home. They're only 24-33, minus 11 plus units, so I would look to play against them. With the Mets are a peculiar team, but the things that I would look at in a positive sense, There's three pitchers that I look at with them: Jacob DeGrom, Zach Wheeler, and John Neese. And when any of those pitchers are pitching, I think you have some halfway decent value there. And so to play on that trio of pitchers when they pitch, and especially if they're underdogs. As far as the other teams, Peter, you mentioned Miami earlier. I'm just not on board with Miami. They're like a roller coaster ride at Great America. They're up and they're down, going all kinds of different directions. Their bullpen is fourth most used in the National League. The rest of the teams, I really can't say I have a strong opinion on.
And you don't want to touch continue to fade Atlanta?
No, because I think they're going to improve. Again, I think they're a 500 team, and that's basically what they are right now at 58 and 56.
All right, yeah, but I see them as overvalued. I'll throw in for myself, just my own personal recommendation forecast, continue to fade Atlanta. We'll see how that turns out.
On my piece of paper, I got the low shack column here. I will mark it down as well.
Okay, sounds good, Doug Upzone. Thanks.